The number one question that I get is, what is that plastic material that you use to mount the amps to that board? Well, it is ABS plastic. I got it both in 1/8 and 1/4 inch. The 1/8 inch is a lot more bendable and flexible, and the 1/4 inch is a lot more sturdy. If I need to bend something, I will heat up the 1/8 inch, but for the most part, I like using 1/4. It has one slick side and one texture side, and for mounting my amps, I like using the texture side. Remember, this amp board has to be 100% removable, so we're going to be using a 60 amp quick disconnect connector for the sub wires coming from our audio control 800.1, and we're going to use 3 sets of RCA couplers and 1.5 foot RCAs, along with an 8-point bus bar for the speaker connections from our audio control 300.4. Here we have a VDB1, which is a 0 gauge to 2 4 gauge power and ground distribution, and we're going to just use some female and male connectors for the remote wire. So I'm feeling pretty confident about how this amp board is starting to come together, so I want to go ahead and get the amps mounted to the board. I'm using number 8 Phillips, and they're about a 1/4 inch screw. They go more than halfway through to make sure that the amp is going to be secured to the board, but not all the way through too much to where if you reach behind it, you may stab yourself. Now, even though this is a short clip, off camera, I probably spend about 20 or 30 minutes just planning how I want this thing to go. It's going to be so important to make sure that these wires go the proper way, because if you drill too many holes and don't use them, your amp board is going to look tacky. And now finally we can start wiring. When doing the amp board, I like to make sure that everything is exact, so I like to lay everything out before we make anything permanent. So first I want to make sure I measure out the sub wire going to the side, and then we want to connect it with the ferrules. The ferrule crimper that I'm using can crimp up to a 6 gauge wire if I'm not mistaken. Anything bigger than that, like 4 gauge, 8 gauge, and 0, it's going to be crimped down as soon as you put it inside the amplifier with the set screw. Now with the sub wire temporarily in the amp, I can route the rest of the way and go ahead and drill the holes for our zip ties. If I'm honest, I don't know how to install wires to this quick disconnect, but I can insert the wire in and then I can do a small crimp on the back, and I figured that will hold it down tight enough to where I can actually fill it up with solder. That way it can be secure. After doing my tug test, I know that wire is not going anywhere, so then I want to roll down the military grade heat shrink both on the quick disconnect side and the side that's going into the amp. Then I can continue to dress it up with some expanded braided sleeving. This stuff is called Tech Flex, and I'm going to throw one more piece of heat shrink over it just to kind of finish up the look. Now that we got this stuff done, I can go ahead and install the wire into the amp and start finalizing it by laying the wire out and putting the zip ties where it's supposed to go in order to route this wire where we want it to go. This is exactly why preparation and how you want everything to look is so important, just so you can get the desired look for the install and the proper functionality. So now that we're done with the sub quick disconnect wire, the RCAs are next. 100% removable means everything must be able to be disconnected, including the RCA. So we're using 3 sets of RCA couplers, and we're going to physically mount these to the board because I don't want things flopping around. I want this to be clean, accessible, easy to troubleshoot, and sturdy. So what we're using is 1.5 foot 2-channel RCAs, and I'm getting 3 sets. It would have been a whole lot easier if I could have found some male to female 2-channel extensions, but I couldn't find any. I also didn't want to get a standard 17-foot RCA because this car is small and it didn't need 17 feet where I was going to have a crap ton of slack that I have to coil up and stick somewhere. Now granted, I could put the RCAs on the board and start in the trunk and run all my wires to the front, but I also know that the customer plans on doing a lot of work inside the trunk, which is the reason why this amp board needs to be 100% removable. So I don't want him to have to reinstall those RCAs 4 or 5 different times if he has to keep going back in to do any type of work that he needs to do. I drilled 4 holes so we can route the RCAs actually behind the board, and even though this is ABS plastic and I could have just kept the hole open, I used snap bushings anyway because I like the look. Now I gotta be honest, I did want to keep the RCAs on top of the board because y'all know I like showing my work, but after talking it over with my co-worker, it would just seem to be best to run them behind. But just because they're in the back don't mean it can't look good. Using the zip tie mount to make sure that everything stays in place. Now with the RCAs out the way, it's time to go ahead and get the speaker wires going. We want to start by mounting the bus bar to the board, and we want to spin some wire. After that, we want to use some 18 gauge ferrules to go on the ends, and then we're going to use our ferrule crimper to crimp the ends. That the ferrule crimper leaves more like a box style shape once it's crimped, and the outputs on this amplifier connector is more of a rectangular shape, so they do actually line up perfectly. With running these speaker wires from the amp to the bus bar. I don't want to do nothing too crazy. We're going to keep it simple. And right now I just want to halfway drill through just to kind of spot where I want to actually make my holes as I route the wire. And then I'm going to actually go back and drill those all the way through once the wires are out the way. Now, if you remember from the last video, we did route the RCAs behind the board. So I did make sure that the RCAs aren't in the way as I'm drilling these holes. Because man, that would suck if I pierced one of those RCAs because I wasn't paying attention. Either way, I want to go ahead and run the zip ties on the speaker wire. On the last two closer to the bus bar, I want to leave them a little loose because we still have to actually install the wire. Now, I didn't really want to use ring terminals for the bus bar. I wanted to use spade terminals, like the fork style terminals, to go in, because that would have been way easier to just lift up the screw a little bit and pull them straight out without having to actually lift the whole entire thing out. But anything's better than nothing, so it's all good. I still think this amp board is turning out nicely. Last video of this series, we are mounting the power and ground distribution blocks, and we're going to be running the power wire, doing some test fitting and dressing it up. For those wondering, this is a T-Spec VDB1. Is a 0 gauge in to 2 or 4 gauge wire output distribution block, which is the perfect ones to use in this situation since both of our audio control amps have onboard fusing. Now, crazy enough, you might not believe this, but I was doing all this work and then my battery died. So right now you're about to see me test fitting these, and it's going to go to the finished product. But you really didn't miss anything because we were just adding some braided sleeve and some heat shrink, and that's pretty much it. If you want to start doing amp boards like this, then go ahead and just start doing it. You'll get better each time you do it, and ignore what the haters say. See, they care way more about being in your business and try to tear you down than trying to go find their own. See, what God got for me is for me, and what God got for you is for you, which is why I don't mind teaching y'all my trade, because more customers for you does not mean less customers for me. Your client is probably not supposed to be my client at all, but if I've been installing for 15 plus years so I can develop a skill and then teach you how to better serve your client, then I find way more fulfillment in that than actually doing the job myself. I actually rather you do the job so I don't have to do it. I just want to help you do it better. Now, I ain't nowhere near perfect, and even though the client loved everything about the install that I did for him, as I'm editing this, there's a lot of things that I would change, but I'll know better for next time because I'm still learning. And that's it for this install. God bless y'all. Peace.